Sean Haney and Justin Funk here with you for the results of the October 2024 Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. Thank you to all of our Insights panel members that answered this month's survey. We greatly appreciate it. We had a whole bunch of questions pertinent to your farm businesses. Of course, our goal here is to allow the farmer to speak with one voice, tell your peers and the rest of the industry in terms of how you're feeling about it and your attitudes and behaviors around a number of different topics that farmers are dealing with across Canada. Justin, this is exciting because, harvest is almost wrapped up for a good part of Canada. There's some corn, of course, still to be taken off in southwestern Ontario, but it kind of allows us to put a little bit of a lid on the 2024 crop and sort of do a little bit of a look back review and start thinking about 2025.
Yeah, you bet. And I think in this study, we've seen some pretty dramatic shifts from what we've seen in previous ones. So looking forward to diving a little deeper into this with you, Sean. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's dive into the data. And as my dad would say, buckle up. Here we go. So.
All right. So for some of you, this may be your first time participating in the CFSI. Just a very quick overview. We do this survey the exact same way every quarter so that we can compare the results to the previous quarter and all the other studies that we've done going back to September of 2022. In this particular edition, we had 471 farmers participate in the survey. And so that puts us at that plus or minus 5% degree of accuracy. That's our margin of error. So, we look at this and say this is pretty representative of how farmers in Canada are feeling. When we calculate the results, so we present you with a question. So this is actual results here from the October study. The first one was on current financial situation. Would you say that your operation today is financially better off, worse off, or about the same? And so this is how the panel responded. And what we do is we take the positive result, which would be better off, and then we subtract the worse off, which is the negative result, and then that gives us this differential, in this case of negative 37.7. We add 100 to it, that creates an index. So our index for current financial situation is 62.3. So that would be considered a negative index number. So when we plot this on our chart, we now have 100 as being the neutral line. So anything that falls above this line is a positive sentiment. Anything that falls below this line is a negative sentiment. So with that, let's take a look at some of the information that we collected in October, starting with current farm financial performance. So looking at the recent trend here, going back to October of 2023, it's been pretty tight, just outside of that margin of error. This is the single biggest decline that we have seen since the inception of the study back in September of 2022.
Moving from 84 to 62.
Yeah.
So pretty significant there.
Yeah. As far as future performance, so would you say 12 months from now that your farm is going to be better off, worse off, or about the same financially? You can see this one bounced around a little bit. January 24 was, I think, an outlier. But in this case, we see no change. So despite the fact that the current farm financial performance number has declined so much, the future farm financial performance number has remained exactly the same.
Yeah. We're going to get to more of the, as we go through all these numbers, we're going to get to more of the analysis of this, but I will give you a bit of I guess, an indication of my thought. I'm surprised. I am surprised that not the current drop, but that future is held at basically a July's number, while current farm financial performance has declined so much.
Yeah. Something we should also point out and remind people that the future farm financial performance number has never been positive. It's always been in the negative, but it's never really, other than that one, deviated a whole lot from the numbers that you see in front of you here. As far as optimism towards the Canadian ag economy, this is a question that's positioned in the next 12 months. Are we going to have financially good times or bad times? You can see, again, a blip in January of 24. In the current index, we see, I would say, pretty much no change. If you're looking within the margin of error on that one. Looking out at the future of the ag industry, which is a 5-year look, again, we see the blip from January, but again, things really haven't changed all that much within the margin of error. Slight decline, but I don't think it's anything to be too worked up about. Now, where the rubber really hits the road is when we take a look at the confidence in making farm investments. This number you can see has been gradually increasing after having remained relatively stable from September of 22. You can see now we're at 69, so we are working our way up on that one. And there's likely some variables that are contributing to that. Interest rate, of course, being the main one. Confidence in marketing crops. So we asked farmers how they feel about their confidence in marketing their crops, and you can see this one bounced around a little bit. We're back up to the same level that we were a year ago, which is just approaching that neutral line. So still a little ways to go on that one. And again, one of the factors that is likely contributing to this is the bouncing around of the outlook on selling crops. So I know this is a rather generalized question, but in trying to gather sentiment, do you feel that the markets are going to be getting better, so you should be holding your crop and saving it for when it is better, or should you be selling now because those prices are going lower? So there's been a lot of variability on this one. We're actually back up to one of our highest numbers in quite a while when we're looking at the outlook on those grain markets.
Yeah, I believe our all-time high was July of 2023 at a 138.
Okay,
So,
yeah. So there you go.
hey, when we do this in January, if the trend holds here, or the pattern holds, I should say, we'll be back below 100. And then maybe we'll jump higher when we get to April. But you can see that this one has if you're into statistics, the highest standard deviation of any of the index numbers that we've been tracking.
Yeah, it always has been. Now this one, we want to ask questions related to farmer state of mental health. We think this is a very important issue. It has remained relatively stable since we've been doing the study. I mean, really, Sean, you can remember this number has just kind of fluctuated around that level of 100 since September. So, the question is phrased is do you feel your mental health is in a better position or a worse position or about the same as it was 12 months ago? This is the first time we have ever seen any major decrease in this number. So, there's a lot going on out there. We can see it just by eyeballing this chart. That's the first time that we've ever seen that number decrease to the extent that it has.
Yeah. The year may be taking its toll a little bit. Remember, this is relative to last year. It it doesn't it doesn't mean that they're going to be careful what it's telling us, right? So you could still have very strong mental health and you're a little bit worse than you were last year, but it's still in a good spot. It just shows us we've seen a decrease in the overall quality of mental health when it comes to farmers.
Yeah. So, looking at this, Sean, what are some of your key takeaways?
Well, it's interesting. If you want to just pay attention to the first two questions for a second, current farm financial performance and future farm financial performance, we mentioned that current has really dropped to its all-time low relative to how do I feel about my financial performance now versus 12 months ago. I have to think that a lot of this is commodity market driven. If you look at where, say, the corn market is today versus a year ago, we are less, right? Canola, we are less. Across basically all the commodities, you could say that. What's holding up future relative, to comparison to current? One, if you're looking at these bars, you could probably maybe say that farmers are feeling better about their future farm financial performance because of their outlook on selling crops. We're at a 121. So they're expecting the market to go higher from here, which would really have an impact on how they feel about their financial performance out into the future. We've also kind of bucked a trend here. Going back to September of 22, current farm financial performance was always higher than the future. And in the past number of surveys, we've talked about how current being higher, future being lower, they've converged on each other and they basically were equal. Okay, so it was like a sideways triangle, but they had sort of reached equality. And you can see that in that 80, 86, 85, 84, 87, 84, 84. Well, now what's happened is farmers are feeling, and just, for the month of October, right now, we've got future higher than current. So farmers feeling better about the future financial performance than they are their current farm financial performance. We have not seen this before. Okay, so this is new. So this is something that we're going to be tracking, I think, a little bit over the coming quarters as we do this survey work. Is this kind of how it's going to be for a period of time, or is this a 1 month blip based on how farmers are reading the situation? And you mentioned the confidence in making farm investments. Yeah, we've seen a trend upwards. We're still relatively low at a 69, but the reality is that it has been improving. This is at a time where the commodity market has been going lower. So it's not profitability driven. You could think about maybe interest rates, of course, cost of borrowing being a factor here. And I think about the machinery space. We've seen some price consolidation. Less demand has brought some of the used market and the new market lower, which is allowing farmers to maybe look at, okay, is this the right price? I got a little bit more confidence in making my farm investments. So that one really stuck out to me. Those are the ones that really stuck out to me.
Yeah. So we asked some new questions in this survey. One was related to, well, what are you concerned about the most, and what are you optimistic about the most? And we gave you an opportunity to select your top three. And when you take a look at the areas of concern, now these were presented to the sample, and check the box. Commodity prices, input prices were by a large margin the highest mentioned areas of concern, followed by weather and then equipment prices. And then on the flip side, when we ask to the same group of people, what are your top three areas of optimism? Increased yields or production efficiency was by far the most commonly mentioned. And then there was the cost of borrowing and the technological advancement. So, this is a snapshot of what's on people's minds when it comes to the things they're worried about versus the things that they're optimistic about.
Yeah, on the areas of concern, no surprise. I bet you if we had done some forecasting and we'd asked the Real Agricultural editorial team, what ones do you think farmers are going to choose as their top three when it comes to levels of concern? I think everyone's picking out commodity prices, input prices, and the weather. Weather totally out of our control. We have a bit of a dry bias for sure the prairies. Even if you think about how weather impacts the markets, there's concern about dryness in the Corn Belt. Commodity prices, they've really fallen off. They have stabilized. We're in a bit of a narrow band here, but we are not profitable at these levels right now across the commodity board. And input prices remain, they've been sticky, right? You look at the cost of fuel, you look at fertilizer, those prices have been sticky as we've seen the commodity market really fall. And so 2025 right now is not penciling out with a black pen, it's penciling out with a red pen, which is we're gonna get to cost cutting here in a second, but that is coming. If you look at optimism, Justin, I'll admit I wouldn't have picked increased yields or production efficiency as the number one answer, but it was a clear front runner.
Yeah.
They say in European football that leading with its front foot, racing ahead of some of the other options. Cost of borrowing, we have seen a reduction in the cost of borrowing from the Bank of Canada, and we're going to continue probably to see more. So farms are highly levered. There is a lot of debt out in farm country, and if you have a variable rate loan, which a lot of people will, they're going to notice a difference in that cost of borrowing, that carrying cost of that debt, as we've seen those rates decline. And hey, I think number one and number three kind of are attached to each other, right? We've got production efficiency, and then we've got technological advancements. Those advancements, they bring efficiency and higher rates of productivity. So those one and three are very linked to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I'm taking a 30,000-foot look at it too, a big difference between the areas of concern and the optimism are the things that I may have control over to a degree.
Yeah.
Some of the decisions I make.
Yeah, expansion or diversification of the farming operation. That one is fascinating. 26% of people choosing that in their top three,
Mhm.
right? So what does that look like? Land has not decreased. That's clear for the most part. So it's more of maybe a diversification situation, or it's the farmers that are expanding are the ones that have really strong balance sheets and are able to do so. And diversification, what does that look like, and how are you doing that? in order to create that level of optimism. I mean, the more cropping people are thinking about getting into livestock, maybe sheep or pork, or maybe getting back into cattle. I guess that's something we're going to have to track here. What that diversification looks like for 26% of the respondents.
Mhm. You mentioned cost cutting measures. We ask this question. I'm really glad that we did. We presented a number of different mechanisms to cut costs, like purchase lower price seed, reduce fertilizer use, etc. And then we asked the likelihood that you would implement any one of these. And so I just want to highlight a couple here in particular where definitely or likely really took over that particular item. So reduce spending on equipment was sort of the most likely, if you will. The second most likely was use more generic products, and the third most likely was reduce the use of some, we would call them maybe specialty or secondary products. So the rest, just kind of eyeball this one. Not really likely. Major, more permanent changes or changes to like, chemical rates or fertilizer use, which could impact uh, productivity. Not really showing up on this one. It's those three that I highlighted, which are the ones I think we need to pay attention to.
Yeah. So there's a bunch to chat about here, but um, positive that cutting chemical rates is not one of the top choices because that brings more resistance. So agronomically, good decision for sure. Purchase lower price seed. Um, kind of fascinating there. Once again, farmers thinking agronomically. I can't afford to, that may be shooting myself in the foot if, I'm choosing lower price seed that maybe doesn't have the disease package or some of the traits. You think about canola and corn and soybeans from a trait perspective. So good agronomic decision there. A little bit surprised on reduced fertilizer use. That one is a little bit more surprising from the standpoint. Farmers have been very concerned about the price of fertilizer. Tells us maybe that there's a lack of banking of fertilizer. Like there's not we're kind of at those critical levels where people can't afford agronomically to cut their fertilizer rates, even though they're not happy with where the prices are. So the top three there were kind of fascinating to me. But more generics make sense from a decision standpoint. What we're going to see from farmers, but there's good decisions and bad decisions when it comes to the use of some of the generics and things like that. Reduce spending on equipment. The AEM numbers they indicate that. You look at the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. Farmers are the demand has been cut significantly when it comes to spending on equipment. Now, if you were an IT company or maybe you had a marketing arm like you were Boeing, staff reductions are we see layoffs all the time, right? So and so company has 50,000 employees around the world and they're cutting 5,000 jobs. It shows you from a farming perspective, there's not a whole bunch of just staff standing around doing nothing. Like staff reduction maybe not really truly possible because then you're not able to actually get the work done that you need to get done from a farming perspective. So I think it shows kind of the status of the industry. People running very light from a staff perspective already. The Ag Web Economy Monitor where they poll ag economists in the US asked some of these similar questions. Restructured debt was much higher in the definitely likely. It not didn't Farmers aren't looking at that way in terms of using these lower interest rates maybe to remortgage and get some lower rates. So that was kind of a difference between Canada and the U.S. And yeah, also renegotiate rental rates or let land go. Not terribly high either. So a lot of status quo. This sort of there's a lot of like I'm not going to disrupt the bones of my operation at this point. I'm very status quo, and I'm going to pick around the edges of cost cutting. That's what this really looks to me like at this point.
Yeah. Well, and we presented these as options. We also ask an open-ended question: are there other things that you're doing? And if we have time here, I'd love to just
Yeah.
summarize some of these. One is becoming a little bit more efficient in terms of how we manage the farm, particularly the operational side of it. So, there were some statements there on, doing things like more in-house repairs and maintenance, for example, as opposed to, spending on that one. Purchasing and input optimization, so maybe being a little bit more thoughtful about how we buy, like bulk purchasing or prepayment for discounts, things like that. Labor and resource allocation. So what we're actually asking of our staff, like the comment there, longer hours and fewer employees, or increasing self-sufficiency, doing more of the work myself. Machinery and equipment, managing purchasing or maybe extending the life of equipment or getting rid of some equipment that is no longer needed. Cost management and spending reductions. Comments here are related to the discretionary purchases that may not necessarily be related to the farm, that are more related to the lifestyle. Somebody made a comment, buy less or eat less ice cream sandwiches. I thought that was clever. But I think it was meant to, sort of capture the idea that there are things that I need and that there are things that I want. Looking at how we manage finances, risk management, debt, cash flow, things like that. And then looking at alternative income, which, the diversification, which we talked about earlier, that could be a driver. And maybe looking at some off-farm work options, getting into like farm markets or, things like that. So these are from the comments generated from the respondents in their own words in many cases.
Yeah. Hey, we said it before. This is, we're in a period here coming off of the highs of, a couple, a number of good years from a farming perspective. Of course, the drought of 21 really still impacts the West, which is a little bit different than what happened in Eastern Canada in 21. But overall, we've had a good run here. We're moving into that period where there's a lot more uncertainty from a profitability standpoint. So now is a good time to be looking at this stuff and not, worrying about cost cutting or cost management in June. Right? The time is really kind of now in doing that prep work. And I think it's important to remember just because you can cut a cost doesn't mean you should. And we have to be smart when it comes to cost management as well. And there may be some areas where it may make sense to increase your costs, right? Like this isn't the time to cut yield, but it's making sure you're producing that yield as efficiently as you possibly can, and maybe a little bit less, about some choices that don't, I hope lead to higher yield. It's more of you're picking some of the costs that have more certainty to attaining that yield. So I'm not going to tell you how to run your operation. This is just things from a simple business management standpoint, the way you kind of have to look at it. So appreciate this is fascinating information.
Yeah. So that's the October Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, and appreciate everybody taking time, especially during this busy time of year. For some to answer these questions. We were right on. The average time was about 6 to 8 minutes to do this, so we appreciate those 6 to 8 minutes and the thought that people put into the open-ended comments as well. Sean, we should mention that there were some other questions that we asked related to government and also land values
Trade.
and trade and the U.S. election. We decided not to put that in this particular video, but we will be sharing the responses to those. They're too different from what we just looked at, so we're gonna kind of parcel those out and share them a little bit later.
Yeah, look for us to do discussions about some of those slides over the coming weeks, and not only more videos from this month's index, this month's study, but also a number of different stories on realagriculture.com, breaking out maybe some of the demographics, East versus West, livestock versus cropping, when it comes to how people are answering this, and who's who in the zoo, so to speak, when it comes to positivity versus negativity on some of these factors. So we got a lot of stuff coming out of Real Agri Studies here over the course of the next few weeks.
Good. Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of the fall, and we'll be back at it again with the January Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index in the new year.
Yeah, stay tuned for all the content that's going to be coming up from this study. And if there's anything we discussed here that you want to provide some feedback on, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or even if you want to, maybe call the Real Ag feedback line. We'd love to hear your voice as well, 855-776-6147. On behalf of myself and Justin Funk of Real Agri Studies, have yourself a great day, everybody. Cheers.